Hello and welcome back. Have you ever felt like building healthy habits was a grind, like something you have to do instead of something you actually enjoy? What if it didn't have to be that way? What if there was a way to make it feel like a game? Something fun, something creative, something you actually want to keep doing. Today, I'm talking with one of my patients, Shelby, and she has been crushing this one. One of the biggest gut health goals that I give my clients, which is getting 30 different plant foods each week. And that may sound like a lot, but Shelby didn't just start checking off the boxes. She made a game out of it and turned it into a fun challenge that she actually looks forward to. And the best part is it's working for her. So today we're going to talk about what that looks like in real life, how she tracks her progress, how she gets creative with her meals, and even how she got a friend in on it to help keep the momentum going. Because the thing is, habit building is not a one size fits all thing. Some of us love structure, systems, routines. That's me. Others need a little play and novelty and challenge just to stay engaged. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just about finding your way. We'll also talk about why this habit, getting in more plant diversity, is so powerful for your gut microbiome. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Shelby's story. Shelby, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so glad you agreed to join me. Thank you so much for being willing to share about yourself too, because I think a lot of people listening will be able to relate. So before we dive into the fun stuff, talking about plant foods and habit building, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you were at when we first met?
Yes. So when I found Alyssa, I had been having tummy issues for years and years. It was my normal, so I thought it was normal. And then since finding Alyssa, I feel like especially the women that I talk to in my life, they have a lot of similar things. We tested, we found out I have SIBO. So we're working on that actively, which is great to actually finally have some answers and know that the chronic constipation to diarrhea cycle that I was going through is not normal and that there is hope and there are ways to move forward and actually have normal bowel movements and have them regularly daily. That's actually really exciting. And yeah, I think especially for women, we just minimize our own issues, especially our gut issues, and just tell ourselves, no, this is just it. So Alyssa's really helped with that.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think as a result of also just the medical system not really knowing what to do with IBS, so it sends the message of, okay, there's not much we can do here. Yeah, it can be normal to have constipation sometimes, take a laxative, and it's kind of minimized. So, and what you're saying is that it's not normal. There's a reason you're having such issues. And your issues, they were severe, right? You were
They
having
were.
severe symptoms as far as the gut symptoms specifically, but also allergy type things going on.
Yeah, random hives that I had no explanation for.
Yeah. So affecting your whole body, and that's inflammation. So that's not a good thing. No?
No.
So, yeah, Shelby and I have been working together for a while now, and we've been able to identify what's been out of balance with her gut microbiome. If I had to estimate, it feels like we're 80, maybe 80, 90% to clearing it because you're not having to use symptom management anymore, and you're able to eat. Another indicator for me when when their microbiome is balanced out and their SIBO is cleared is that they're able to tolerate foods again. Because initially, you poor thing, we had you on a low FODMAP, low histamine diet. I hate having to work within that framework because it's so limited.
Yeah. And then I'm vegetarian on top of that. So I limited myself even more.
Yeah, you're vegetarian on top of that. So it was tough, but now you want to tell us a little bit about just in general the variety that you're able to tolerate?
Yes. So I can go out and eat pizza now, which is like all the big bad things you don't want to eat on low FODMAP and low histamine. So that was really exciting because that's one of my favorite foods. And then I love Brussels sprouts, so I can incorporate those again. And then blackberries are back in now, and I can eat stone fruits again. So yeah, the only thing I'm really staying away from are just apples and pears at the moment. But I feel like everything else is agreeing with my system overall.
Amazing. And we're going to talk shortly about all the different plant foods you're deliberately incorporating. So you're getting plenty of FODMAPs back in the diet. Yeah, just those apples and pears are pretty much the only triggers you're still. I mean, those are simple to avoid. The hard stuff to avoid is like being able to have pizza or just go out and order something normal and not have it mess up your night. That's the tough part, right? So, yeah, if it's just apples, just pears for a while, that's a simpler thing. Just chatted about your progress. I think that will get better too with time. We're about, like I said, 80 to 90% better. We have 10 to 20% room for improvement. I think before we hear about how Shelby gamified her meals, let's talk about what we're even talking about. This goal of getting 30 different plant foods per week and why it matters in the first place. It's not just an arbitrary number I pulled out of a hat. There's actually some really compelling research behind it. When we say plant diversity, we mean different types of plant-based foods. So that's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, if there's enough of the herb in there to really be significant. So maybe if you're adding ginger to something, you're grating in a good amount of it. Or maybe you're making a pesto and there's a good amount of basil in there. And this is because each type of plant food feeds different types of gut bacteria. And the more diversity of plant foods, therefore, the more diverse microbiome you're feeding. And that means a more resilient microbiome because the more different types of good bacteria you have, the stronger your defenses are against overgrowth of less favorable bacteria, the more short chain fatty acids you produce, which are nutrients that your gut microbes produce when you feed them the fibers they want. They produce these short chain fatty acids, which help heal and keep the gut lining healthy. And it also helps to calm inflammation. So there was a study in 2012, the American Gut Project, and this looked at over 11,000 participants from around the world. One of the clearest findings was people who ate more than 30 different plant foods per week had significantly more diverse gut microbiomes than those who ate 10 or fewer. And so just the sheer variety of plants led to richer, more resilient gut ecosystems. And then we also have a 2022 review in the journal Nutrients that looked at how plant diversity affects short chain fatty acid production. So that's what I was just talking about. Examples of short chain fatty acids. The most well-known one is butyrate. There's also acetate, propionate. There's about a dozen of them. And these are the compounds that our gut microbes produce when they ferment fibers. And so this study showed that plant diversity in the diet does help improve this short chain fatty acid production. And then a 2020 study published in Frontiers in Nutrition zoomed in on the functional benefits of fiber diversity and found that people eating diets rich in a variety of plant fibers had higher microbial richness overall. And that was linked to better outcomes in terms of IBS symptoms, metabolic syndrome risk, and even mental health markers. So when we feed our gut microbes a mix of plant fibers, we see improvements across the board in many different areas of health. That's why we're talking about this. And it's especially important, I think, when we're looking at people with gut issues that have to do with the microbiome, because a lot of times when you're having the symptoms of IBS or IBD and you're really symptomatic, what do we to help with that? A lot of times we're restricting certain food. We're going on a therapeutic diet like the low FODMAP. And so we're actually pulling out the foods that feed bacteria. And then also another thing that we're doing, if we do find that there's dysbiosis or SIBO, is we're pulling in antimicrobials or we're bringing in antibiotics. So here we're hitting the microbiome again. So because of the way that we address these issues is hard on the microbiome, we want to think about this. And with my clients, I start thinking about this early on. So like with you, Shelby, initially you were on low histamine, low FODMAP. We don't want to stay there long, but we started there and you felt better when you were able to do it, right?
I did. I felt so much better. And then the first time we tried reintroducing foods, we still weren't quite there. So we had to scale back a little bit and go a little bit more slowly.
Yeah, so if you start bringing in foods and you're reacting to them, that's a sign that you still have a pretty significant overgrowth. And that's where a lot of people can get stuck. And that's a sign that more needs to be done to address the bacterial overgrowth. So, yeah, we stopped introducing, we gave it more time on the antimicrobials. And now, fast forward to this point, you've reintroduced a lot more successfully. So, let's talk about this gamifying concept. And I'll admit, I'm somebody who likes systems. I like structure, efficiency. So I always think about how can I make this kind of streamlined, repeatable, automatic. But that's a little bit different. It's the same, but when you mentioned gamifying, that brings in kind of a fun aspect to it because I know other people that like to turn habits into games. Like my sister-in-law, she's always playing games. She's a real game person. And that must be how you are, Shelby, right?
Yes, yeah. I love novelty. I love games. So if I'm going to be consistent, it can't just be a plain old boring habit. There has to be some amount of novelty to it. I have to feel like I'm winning.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it's just drudgery, right? It's one more thing you have to do.
Yes.
So tell us some of the things that you did. So when I first mentioned getting 30 different plant foods per week, what was your initial reaction?
My thought was, oh, this sounds fun. This sounds like a challenge, and it's specific enough that I can hit this. So I started at least one meal a day, counting how many plant foods I could get in that single meal. And my favorite that I've done is the smoothies because I can get over 30 plant foods in one smoothie. And then I know I've hit my goal for the week. But then I like to see how many plant foods I can get whenever I'm home cooking. Even when I'm out, I like count the foods to see how many I've gotten. I'm like, if I get more than 10, I give myself a gold star. Yeah.
I love that. And I almost spit out my water when you first told me that you got 30 plant foods in a smoothie. And I was like, wait a second, I think you heard me wrong. That's not what I told you had to do, but you knew that. You heard me right. You were just like
I just was like, oh, I can knock
challenging.
it all out in one thing. Yes.
Okay. So go through with us, like, what are the types of things you put in a smoothie to get up to 30?
Okay, so you gave me a really good veggie mash recipe. So it has 13 root veggies in it. So that goes in, a little ice cube of that. Then I'll do the powders that we're doing to rebuild my gut. So fiber, other fiber, prebiotic. And then I
Yeah,
will,
so you're on some prebiotic fibers and things like that,
yep,
resistant
yep,
starch fibers, sun fiber.
yep. So we put those in. Then I will do just a tiny bit of like 5 to 10 different fruits. So depending on what I'm feeling, like I think in my freezer right now I have dragon fruit, acai, cherries, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries. I have kiwi in there. I have mango. I have all sorts of things. So like I just put in the teensiest little bit of each, and then
Are they in a blend already, or do you have like individual?
I have individual ones. So I get to personalize the blend,
Okay.
which depending on my mood is great. Then a lot of times, especially since I'm vegetarian, I like to put in protein powder. So Tum Love protein powder is what goes in, vanilla or chocolate.
That's a low FODMAP protein powder, Tum Love.
Yes, we love it. It is nice and friendly. And then the Nutso nut butter, which has 7 nuts in it. Then I have a chia, hemp, and oh my gosh, what's the third seed? That's flaxseed mix that I put in, which some of those are in the Nutso, so it's not quite 10 right there, but we're close. So I put all of that in, and then I might grate some ginger in there and maybe throw in something else. So yeah, it's pretty easy to get to 30 with that.
And it sounds like those things all mix well,
They do. They do.
flavor wise, palate
Yeah.
wise. And
Yes.
they're not using a ton of any one thing, right?
No, just little bits. Oh, and then I throw in either spinach or kale. Just tiny little bits. So like it's just little bits of everything. And like if I'm feeling a particular flavor one day, then I'll cut it down and not get as much biodiversity, but I like to get at least one 30 plus smoothie a week.
That's amazing. And I think that's a really important key to understand that we're not talking about 30 full servings of vegetables or anything like that. We're talking even tiny bits count because your gut bacteria, they're very small. They don't need a lot. And that's the idea behind the veggie mash is you're grabbing 10 to 15 different vegetables, you're blending them up together, and then you're freezing them in ice cube trays. So even in one cube, you're getting 10 to 15 different things because I think a lot of people listening might be feeling like, especially if you're currently suffering with IBS or IBD, feeling, oh my God, that would kill me. But first of all, you don't have to put 30 in there starting out with.
Yeah, you don't have
But
to.
you could use low FODMAP fruit. So you could use strawberries, you could use frozen pineapple, you could use frozen blueberries, just little bits. The nutso, it just depends if it has cashew. They have different ones. And so you can pick one, and it's just a little bit. You could even start with a teaspoon.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't put much in there. I'm like, I do need some healthy fat, so we'll put some in, but I never put more than a tablespoon in.
Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about little bits and it adds up to more to diversity. So this is something as soon as we get symptoms calmed down, which happens in the initial phases through either a therapeutic diet changes or supporting motility or supporting bowel movement. If in the case of diarrhea, getting some structure or some form to the bowel movement. So as soon as we can calm down bloating and things like that, with our patients, we immediately start thinking about this because we know that we need to diversify the diet long term. And so we don't wait until like at the place Shelby's at now, like now Shelby can eat everything but apples and pears. But we don't wait till we get to that point to start doing this. You can do this even with a sensitive system by using foods that you tolerate or using just really small amounts of things. Okay, Shelby, you were telling me about the yogurt. So it's
Yes.
more than the smoothie. You have a few other foods you do this with.
I have a few other foods. So, yogurt, and this one kind of started on vacation with my best friend because the hotel had breakfast available and they had yogurt. And we both, she did it with me because she also has some tummy issues. So, we're like, let's do this together. We both aim for lots of plant biodiversity. So, we would go around and try to put as many different things in the yogurt as possible. And then I had all my powders with me that I also mixed into the yogurt, and we could get up 10 plant-based foods pretty easily within the yogurt. And at home it's even easier because I have even more things that I can throw in, some fruits, some nuts, everything. And then the powders mix really well with the yogurt, so that was a good way for me to consistently and easily get it without having to choke down gross powders.
That's a really good tip. So you're saying like a fiber supplement powder, mix it with your yogurt.
Yeah, yeah, if you don't feel like making a smoothie every day, yogurt is probably my second favorite way to get it. I mean, I will choke down gritty whatever, but it's not as fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So yogurt's another great medium for this diversity thing. Cause yeah, like you said, different fruits, different nuts, different seeds. If there's a granola available, great. And again, it can be really small amounts, a sprinkle of this, a sprinkle of that, because I know that this is intimidating for people when their stomach's really sensitive. So if you're intimidated, start with what you know you tolerate, but start thinking about getting the diversity. And then another one's oatmeal, right?
Yes. So oatmeal and yogurt to me are pretty interchangeable as far as what you can put in. So at home, I can easily get 15 to 20 plant-based foods in my oatmeal, which is really nice and easy. And then the other one I like to do is eggs, and I'll just put one of the veggie mash ice cubes in some scrambled eggs, and then there we go. Voila, I have 10 to 15 plant-based foods without having to add anything to it.
Amazing. So there you go. So you might think you're doing good by throwing some spinach in your eggs, and you are. But what if you threw a veggie mash cube in there? And once you know this, it changes everything, right? Before I learned this, I didn't think it mattered. As long as I get a veggie in there, that's good enough, right? But understanding that the diversity is important, you'll just start to see more and more opportunities to get that in. And the oatmeal example, which I usually give patients this as an example because to me it's so simple. It's like you mix a bag. You can either buy it pre-mixed or you can make your own mix of nuts. You can do the same with dried fruit. So maybe you have 4 or 5 nuts mixed in a bag and 3 or 4 dried fruits. You could just put a tablespoon of each in your oatmeal. And now, what might have just been a one plant food breakfast, if you just did oatmeal with like brown sugar and butter, is now like over 10. And you're not eating a larger volume in your breakfast. Love the oatmeal example. So, and you have your friend doing it with you too.
Yes. Yeah, which keeps it exciting because we'll text each other or call each other and be like, I got this many foods today. So it keeps you accountable, but it also keeps it like we're not competing against each other, we're competing against ourselves, but we are there to motivate each other, which is really nice.
That's awesome. Does that accountability help?
Yes, it does. It does.
Mm-hmm. And again, just gives it a good feeling. I think that's what I love most about this conversation and why I asked you to do this episode is because it can just feel so heavy, these gut issues. They can feel so overwhelming. I mean, the symptoms alone can really be depressing and bring you down. Oh, and then definitely diet it can be viewed as drudgery. My personality and my approach is food friendly. And so we try to make gut health food friendly. And that's exactly what looking at things in this way can do. And it's not just diet. I think any habits can be gamified, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you do this in other areas of your life?
I do. So I have ADHD, so my brain really likes the novelty. So habits are not necessarily habits for my brain. I have to find fun ways to gamify my life or romanticize my life to get myself to do basic things. But it makes life fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It does. And you use apps and things to keep track and to remind yourself.
Yes. The mindfulness and breathing has been harder for me to implement just because of regularity, but really important for your gut. So I finally just put it on my watch to remind me like 4 times a day to just take a minute to have some mindfulness, either reflect on my mood or just breathe slowly for a minute. And I might only get one a day, but if it pops up and I'm at a place where I can do it, I will do it. But it just takes the mental load away.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Shelby's talking about the deep diaphragmatic breathing that we recommend to help calm your nervous system, which helps support better digestion. And that's a major habit change because our lives are so busy. To actually just stop and breathe. First of all, you have to understand the importance of it, and it's not intuitive to think that would have anything to do with your gut health. So there's a learning curve there, and just start. Do you feel a difference with that?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like even after just a minute of deep breath, your whole body just relaxes and you just feel a little bit clearer and more calm and like more present. So even just a minute at a random point in the day makes a difference.
Yeah, it really does. It happens quickly. So that you don't have to plan like a 15-minute breathing session. It's not like a meditation or something where it takes a lot of time. In just a couple minutes, a minute, you can deactivate your fight or flight mode and get into that resting state. And a minute, I can spend a minute just like procrastinating, or like we waste minutes all the time. So it really is something, if you can in your day, stop for a moment, it's worth it. Yeah, gamifying actually is research backed. There's a book called For the Win by Kevin Werbeck and Dan Hunter that breaks this down really clearly. And they talk about how game design principles, things like earning points, completing challenges, and getting social feedback can actually boost motivation and long term engagement. So basically, when your brain feels like it's winning, it gives you a little dopamine hits that reinforce the habit. And that helps keep you going, especially with goals that require consistency over time, like changing your diet or doing deep breathing every day. And there are peer reviewed studies on this too. One that stood out to me was a 2019 study published in JMIR, Journal of Medical Internet Research. They looked at how gamifying wellness goals impacted behavior, and they found that when people used gamified elements like badges, streaks, or progress bars, they were more likely to stick with their routines and actually enjoyed the process more than using those traditional tracking tools. If you are a person who feels like the usual food logs, tracking apps just aren't cutting it, you might just need a more playful framework like Shelby has built for herself. Shelby, what advice would you give someone who feels overwhelmed with changing their habits?
I would say find what works for you. You don't have to follow the traditional advice. I was so overwhelmed if I had to log my foods or track them traditionally. It just felt like an extra burden and an extra task. And in my head, I wasn't doing it perfectly. So I wasn't winning. So once I turned it into a game, it gave me the motivation and the dopamine hits to want to continue. And so it might take some time to figure out what works, and it might not work in all areas of your life, but just keep trying because there is a method out there for you. You will find it.
Yeah, I think the main message is don't be afraid to think outside of the box. You don't have to do it the way everybody else does it. And if it's really something that you want to do because it's a goal that's important to you, just figure out how it can work for you. And feel free to try something silly, right?
Yeah, it's more fun that way.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will put the recipe and guide for the veggie mash in the show notes for listeners who are interested in trying that. Again, that is great for sensitive systems to help you start to build the diversity, but even just as a way to systemize getting these 30 different plant foods a week, it's a great first step because there you're already getting 15 or 10. So you're already a third or a half of the way to your goal. All right, guys, thanks again for listening today. Thank you, Shelby, for joining us.
Thanks, Alyssa. This was a pleasure.